The right way to handle your husband's infidelity. I was 2 months pregnant when I found out my husband was cheating. I had someone follow him and discovered the other woman was my best friend. I terminated the pregnancy, and when my friend found out, she went crazy. My husband's name is Eric, he was my senior in the same department. He has striking features and a handsome face, the heartthrob of the law faculty. Of course, I wasn't lacking either, there were plenty of people chasing after me. He was a senior in his 4th year when I was a junior in my 3rd. I was the class monitor. His thesis advisor was also my counselor. We often ran into each other in the counselor's office, and over time, we became familiar. He started looking for a job after graduating from college. After I graduated, I was recommended for graduate school and began my master's studies. In my 1st year, Eric started openly pursuing me, making it the talk of the school. 6 months later, we got together. After I finished my graduate studies, my family gave me some money to start a small law firm. Eric became the first person I hired. Over 2 years, the law firm grew bigger and bigger, and our relationship grew stronger. At 25, I married him despite my parents' objections. There's a saying, never marry someone your parents forbid you to marry. After we got married, his family was eager for me to have children, but I postponed it for 2 years, citing work as the reason. I am now over 2 months pregnant. Since becoming pregnant, he has been treating me better and better, doing the laundry, cooking, and even if I want a bowl of wonton soup in the middle of the night, he'll immediately go out to buy it. We bought a bunch of parenting books, and he always flips through them during his days off. He cares about the child even more than I do. The only problem is that he's coming home later and later every day. Whenever I call, he always says he's busy with work. One night, as usual, he was working late. I saw on an employee's Facebook a complaint about working overtime alone. Sensing something was wrong, that he was hiding something from me, this was the first time I began to suspect. The second time was when I got up to use the bathroom in the middle of the night. Inside the washing machine, on the inside of a shirt, I found a long brown hair while I have short black hair. Given his work environment, it's impossible for someone else's hair to be left inside his shirt. My intuition told me he was cheating. After a brief period of heartbreak, I pulled myself together. I'm a lawyer, and if I suspected my husband of infidelity, I needed to gather solid evidence to maximize my benefits in the event of a divorce. Step 1. First, catch him in the act and find out who the other woman is. I started by hiring a private detective to follow Eric. 2 days later, I received the photos the detective had taken. I recognized both people in the pictures. One was my husband, and the other was my good friend Luna. Luna was someone I met after Eric and I got together. They were from the same hometown and had been best buddies since childhood. When I first opened my law firm, Eric recommended her for a position there. She graduated from a 3rd-tier university and wasn't a graduate student, so under normal circumstances, she wouldn't have been able to get into my firm. But knowing her for years and because she and Eric shared that hometown bond, I agreed to hire her. After confirming my husband's affair and finding the other woman, I moved on to the second step of my plan, terminating the pregnancy. I was definitely going to divorce him, and if I gave birth to the child, growing up with divorced parents would mean an incomplete childhood. Besides, I had no intention of becoming a single mother. That night, Eric came home and saw I wasn't asleep. "Honey, what's wrong? It's already 11 o'clock and you're still up. Are you hungry? Want me to get you something to eat?" If I hadn't known about his affair, I might have thought he was being considerate. "Are you feeling unwell? I can take you to the hospital." I replied, "No, I just miss my parents a bit." My parents were traveling around the world and were currently in the UK. Since I needed some time to recover after the abortion, being abroad seemed more suitable. I said, feeling a bit down, "Staying at home all day is suffocating, and it's not good for recovery either. I want to go out and have some fun too. Going to the UK is perfect since my parents are there and can take care of me." Eric looked troubled but didn't try to stop me. In the middle of the night, I woke up and found Eric wasn't in bed. Quietly stepping out of the bedroom, I saw the light was on in the other bathroom. I went over and heard him on the phone. She said she needed to clear her head, and there was nothing I could do about it. Don't worry, your granddaughter will be fine. Since she's abroad, her parents will definitely take good care of her. Mom, please rest assured. We will definitely get a divorce. Once the child is weaned, I'll leave. Luna will understand me. I'll tell her tomorrow. Hearing him hang up, I quickly went back to bed and lay down. The next day, while Eric was at work, I went to a second-hand market and bought a bugging device. I installed it inside the bedroom wardrobe, completely undetectable given Eric's height. That afternoon, I boarded a plane to the UK. I didn't tell my parents about Eric's affair. I only said it wasn't the right time to have a baby, that I wanted to terminate the pregnancy, and asked them not to tell Eric. My parents probably suspected something was wrong between Eric and me but didn't ask for details. I successfully terminated the pregnancy and recuperated in the UK. During this time, I timed it perfectly to catch Eric after work, eavesdropping on their every move. Knowing that I had gone abroad, the two scoundrels became increasingly brazen. Eric brought Luna home, and they messed around in the house. From my headphones, I could occasionally hear the sounds of MMH, ah ah ah. Afterwards, as they rested, Luna sighed, "This house is really big. I wish I could have a place like this here." Eric and Luna were born in a small mountain village in the west. I had only been there once before we got married. That place was very backward, and only Eric and Luna had made it to college from the entire village. The apartments in this neighborhood were worth their weight in gold. Even if they worked in this city for 100 years, they couldn't afford one. Eric reassured me, "Don't worry, it will happen. Have you thought of a way to make Zoe leave with nothing? Once the child is weaned, send her to prison. All the property under her name will belong to my son. What belongs to my son belongs to me, and what belongs to me belongs to you." Luna giggled, "You're really bad. There's something even worse." Then the headphones filled with screams of awe. I trembled with anger. Those two scoundrels actually wanted to send me to prison. How could I possibly let them manipulate me like that? After resting for 2 days, I received a frantic call from my friend, Zoe. "Do you know what Eric has been up to lately?" "What's going on?" "Eric has been transferring a lot of resources from our law firm to another firm." "Did you know about this?" This friend was my senior from graduate school, Vincent, and also my partner. He told me that Eric, under my name, had introduced all the firm's major clients to a fledgling small firm, and the fees were cut in half. I first comforted Vincent, telling him to pretend he knew nothing, and that I would give him an explanation. I called the private detective I had hired before to investigate this small law firm. By the afternoon, I got a reply it really was a law firm jointly run by Eric and Luna. At the same time, the detective sent me many photos of the two of them together. I had originally planned to rest for a few days, but I hurried back to the country. The first thing I did upon returning was to find Vincent. From him, I obtained the financial expenditures of the firm over the past 2 years. After careful study, I discovered that every single transaction handled by Eric was problematic. Calculating it all, since we got married 2 years ago, he had embezzled nearly $1 million from the firm. When I called the firm's accountant, I learned that every time Eric took money, he did so with my signature to get the funds. And I have never even seen the documents bearing my signature. There is only one explanation: Eric forged my signature and stole my official seal. And ever since I stopped working due to pregnancy, it has become even more frequent. These pieces of evidence would be enough to land him in jail for years. But that still doesn't ease the hatred burning in my heart. That night, Eric unusually didn't work overtime and prepared a table full of dishes. "Honey, these are all your favorites. I knew you'd be home today, so I specially bought some crayfish this morning. This sweet and sour pork ribs dish is pretty good too. Try it." Seeing his attentive demeanor, I knew something was up. Sure enough, as we were finishing the meal, he spoke. The case I was handling fell through. It was a major case he was working on. If it were a minor one, he wouldn't be so attentive. They found another law firm, and their price is half of ours. I comforted him like before, it's okay, our law firm isn't short of cases. He grinned, my wife is really good to me. I felt sick to my stomach. At night, while he was showering, I threw the bugging device in the house into the toilet, then secretly planted a small listening device next to his briefcase. The next afternoon, I disguised myself and took a taxi to the law firm's entrance. Near the end of the workday, I received a call from Eric. Honey, I have to work late again today. You go to bed early, don't wait up for me. I feigned concern for a few moments before hanging up. Shortly after, Eric's car pulled out of the underground garage. Through the wireless earpiece, I heard his conversation with Luna. Luna asked, is the baby in Zoe's belly okay? Don't worry, it's fine. Ah, I wish I could have a child for you myself. My mind went boom, Luna was infertile? At the same time, I realized this wasn't just an ordinary affair. From the start, they were after my child, my house, my money. This was a trap set specifically for me, and I had fallen right into it. Eric comforted her, my child is your child. Once the baby is born, I'll bring him over often. You two can build a bond. From then on, you'll be his mom. You should have Zoe check to see if it's really your son. Mom wants a son. If it's not, just have her terminated, otherwise, it's just a waste of time. Eric replied, okay. A couple of days later, Eric asked me to go to the hospital for a checkup. Go check if it's a boy or a girl. My mom prefers a boy. I pretended to be angry. What if it's a girl? Would you not want it then? No way. I love both sons and daughters. That's more like it. To make it realistic, I found a high school classmate who works at the maternal and child health hospital and, in front of Eric, showed the report from the UK while explaining. My classmate looked at the report and said, it's a boy. The report was real, and my classmate didn't lie. Before I terminated the pregnancy, the doctor had told me. When Eric heard it was a boy, he couldn't stop smiling, eagerly feeding me and urging me to eat more. My classmate, unaware of the real situation, smiled and said, your husband really loves you. He didn't love me, he was worried about his son. After confirming it was a boy, Eric called his mother. She insisted on coming to see her future grandson and to take care of me. I calculated the time it would be at least a day before she arrived. That day, I didn't rest. I found the neighborhood where Luna lived. She had mentioned before that she earned some money and paid the down payment on an apartment. Although the houses here couldn't compare to mine, a down payment still cost over $1,000,000, which was impossible for her to afford on her salary. I strongly suspected that Eric gave her the money. That bitch was actually using my money to buy a house for his mistress. It's fine, I'll make him cough it all up. Eric's mother, Margaret, came over, and after that, I wasn't as free to move around. She said she came to take care of me, but in the end, it was the nanny who cooked and did the laundry, and Margaret was still picky. The food is too salty. Pregnant women can't eat too much salt. Next time, don't add salt when cooking for her. Don't eat anything with a fishy smell either, it's bad for the grandson. Make more bone broth so she'll have strength when giving birth. Also, eat less sugar. If the baby is born with high blood sugar, it won't be good. After a barrage of advice, she turned to me and started lecturing again. Zoe, you really need to exercise more. Your butt is small to begin with, and not working out will only make childbirth harder. Then she seemed to remember something. Oh, Zoe, let me tell you, my grandson has to be born naturally, no C-sections allowed. Babies born naturally are smart. Look at my son, so smart, got into a prestigious university. Being able to have his child is your blessing. I rolled my eyes. How blind was I back then to end up with this bunch of eccentrics? Margaret's exercise routine wasn't just talk, she made me get out of bed at 7 in the morning. I haven't found the source of the down payment for that house yet, but it's definitely Eric who paid. Still, I have no concrete evidence, and the court requires proof. For now, I can only endure the torture of waking up early. One morning, while I was walking in the neighborhood, a woman in her 40s grabbed me. "Are you related to Margaret?" I looked at the woman in front of me. Her clothes were shabby and worn, and she spoke broken Mandarin. I looked puzzled. "Who are you?" The woman tugged at my clothes and asked, "Where is Margaret? Are you going to find her for me?" She had been waiting at the neighborhood gate for several days. When she saw this woman enter the community with Margaret, she originally wanted to speak to Margaret alone, but with creditors pressing hard these past few days, she had no choice but to force this woman to take her to find Margaret. I was stunned. I didn't know this woman at all and didn't answer her. In broad daylight, what could she do to me? Seeing I remained silent, the woman said again, "I'm only looking for Margaret. Take me to see her. She owes me money. Debts must be repaid, it's only right." I realized there was definitely something fishy going on, so I tried to calm her down first. "Don't worry, tell me first. I have money." The woman looked at me suspiciously. "What's your relationship to her?" "I'm their daughter-in-law," the woman muttered, "not like last time." Then she took a phone call, and when she came back, she was even more agitated. "You're Zoe?" I nodded. "Yeah. About that last time, didn't we agree that whether it succeeded or failed, I'd get 500,000? And the miscarriage wasn't even my fault. So far, I've only received the initial 50,000, and I paid all the hospital bills myself. Losing a baby at this stage seriously affected my health. You have to compensate me, right?" The woman stared at me and said bluntly, "The medical expenses plus compensation, along with the previous 450,000, makes a total of 500,000. That's not unreasonable." I was shocked. Suddenly, I understood what Luna meant when she said on the recording last time, "What a waste of time." So they had someone else have Eric's child before, and if it was a girl, they just aborted it? I reassured the woman, "Such a large sum of money can't be given to you immediately. The bank needs to process the application, but I promise you'll have it within 3 days." Seeing my sincere attitude and the deadline I set, she stopped pressing the issue. After the woman left, I quietly followed her to a rundown motel. Once she went inside, I inquired about her at the front desk. The small motel wasn't strict, so I said she was a relative from my hometown who was a bit mentally unstable. The front desk clerk was a young girl who immediately started unloading complaints at me like a spilled bag of beans. The woman's name was Sophie, from another province, and she had checked into the motel 4 days ago. This instantly reminded me of Margaret, who had rushed over from another province 4 days ago. Sophie must have followed her here. Putting together my earlier suspicions, everything began to fall into place. A year ago, Eric was insisting on having a child again, but I refused, saying I was busy with work and under too much pressure. Margaret called me every day, saying, "If you don't have a grandson soon, the Zhang family line will end." And so on. The ones who cried and begged for a grandchild back then stopped calling after a while. It just so happened that those days Eric said his uncle back home had died and he had to go back for the funeral. Since he left, Margaret stopped calling. I thought he had gone back to talk some sense into his mother, but it turned out he was off finding someone to have a child with. And then there was Luna. I remember they went back together and even took leave from work here. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. I went out for a walk and, unexpectedly, got a surprise. If this can be proven true, Eric won't be out of prison for at least 10 years. Luna and Margaret will be going in too. Now, I need enough evidence. I have to see Sophie one more time. Among them, she was the easiest to break through. I waited 2 days and contacted Sophie. "There's been some trouble with the money here. Let's meet." The moment Sophie heard there was a problem with the money, she immediately agreed to meet. I prepared in advance and brought a voice recorder to see Sophie. She seemed a bit uneasy. It was her first time at the cafe. I ordered her a cup of coffee and added 5 or 6 sugar cubes. Sophie stared at my face for a long moment and said, "You city folks are amazing with makeup. The person I saw the first time and the one I see now are completely different." I guessed that last time in the neighborhood, she had mistaken someone else, mixing up Luna and me. This time, I wore makeup just like Luna's, shaping my face and nose to resemble her even more. It was also Sophie's fault for not looking closely at Luna back then, otherwise, she should have recognized her. I smiled faintly, saying nothing. Then she asked again, "What's wrong with the money?" I hesitated, then said, "My husband said that you didn't follow the agreement, that the miscarriage counts as a breach of contract. I tried to persuade him to give you something. After all, I'm a woman and I understand the pain you went through. But all the money is with my husband, I have no say in it." When Sophie heard she wouldn't get the money, she snapped angrily, "You came to me in the first place, asking for money so I could have a baby for you. Everything was agreed upon, and now you're not paying? Do you think I'm easy to mess with? The child really wasn't born, but what can I do?" Sophie shouted anxiously. "How can you blame me? It was clearly your egg that had problems. The doctor said at the time that your egg quality was poor and there was a risk of miscarriage. Besides, you said you'd pay whether it succeeded or failed." I looked at her helplessly. "I really can't make this decision. Why don't you talk to my husband? I'm a woman too, I know it's not easy for you. 500,000 is nothing to us, and I want to compensate you, but if my husband won't budge, there's nothing I can do. Or, I can give you my husband's number. But don't tell him I gave it to you, or he'll kill me." Fear showed in my eyes as I gave Sophie a number. Sophie stared at me, her eyes seeming ready to shoot flames of anger. "Don't try any tricks on me." Then she stormed off in fury. I knew she would definitely go to find Eric. Now it was just a matter of waiting for Eric's move. A day later, the private detective called. "All that money has been transferred to overseas accounts." I had to ask a few friends to trace it, but after moving through several foreign accounts, it ended up back in Eric's account. Now it was just a matter of waiting for Eric to take the bait. During this time, I had to deal with Eric. First, I needed to distract Margaret so she wouldn't pay attention to me. At breakfast, I said, "Girls these days have no self-respect. They party too hard when they're young, and by the time they regret it, it's already too late." Margaret looked up. "What's wrong?" Margaret used to have an old-fashioned phone without any video apps. After coming here, Eric bought her a smartphone, but she only knew the basics. She didn't know how to use TikTok, but seeing me scrolling through videos, she wanted to peek over. I played the news from TikTok for her to listen to. Since she couldn't read, she understood the situation immediately from the narration in the video. Girls in your big cities just don't respect themselves. Unlike where we're from, women stay with one man their whole lives. Now you know what regret feels like. I chimed in, "Yeah, they can't have children anymore. No kids of their own for life. I have a friend too, once she found out her wife couldn't have kids, they got divorced. And when you dig deeper, turns out she had 4 abortions." This kind of making things up story, she wanted as many as I had. Margaret's face turned pale after hearing me. I went on, "There are also some birth control pills with serious side effects. Recently, experts said taking too many affects egg quality." Spurred on by my words, Margaret went out right after breakfast. I guessed she must be going to find Luna. I followed her to the small law firm run by Luna and Eric. They both claimed to be off duty at the firm under the pretense of investigating a case, but were actually handling matters at their own office. I really ended up raising 2 scoundrels. The bug I had switched out several times was finally paying off. Their quarrels came through my wireless earpiece. As soon as Margaret entered the firm, she started making a scene, a downright shrew. The clients waiting for consultations scattered one after another at the commotion. Margaret pointed at Luna's nose and shouted, "You wretch, is it because you've had too many abortions before that you can't get pregnant now?" Luna's face turned pale, and she forced a bitter smile, saying, "Mom, what are you talking about? I knew you, you slut, couldn't behave, couldn't give me a grandson, and you're dragging my son down." Eric tried to reason, "Mom, it's not like that. Luna is innocent. She's been with me since early on." Margaret's anger only lessened a bit when she heard her son speak. But she still didn't show Luna any kindness. With Margaret's temper, Luna's good days were still far from over. Actually, the whole thing about taking birth control pills affecting egg quality, I made that up, just to deceive Margaret and drive a wedge between her and Luna. But it was true that Luna had quite a few boyfriends in college, even juggling several at once. That much I didn't falsely accuse her of. That night, Eric didn't work late but came home with a worried look. I knew what he was worried about: money. When Eric came home from work, Sophie blocked his way demanding money. Maybe my acting was effective, because Sophie didn't mention me at all while threatening Eric. This was all thanks to the detective uncovering Sophie's past life. Sophie had a husband before, who either beat or yelled at her. Later, when her husband died, she was kicked out by her in-laws for not having children. Those years of domestic abuse cast a shadow over her. The last time we met, I deliberately said things to make her believe that Eric was also an abusive man. Before Eric came back, I listened to those recordings. Sophie said, "I'm barefoot and not afraid of those wearing shoes, not afraid of going to jail. If I don't get the money, then we'll just go to jail together. I have no children and nothing to fear, but you have a bright future and a job. You don't want to ruin it just like that, do you?" Sophie's words struck right at Eric's soft spot. He had studied for over 20 years, all to escape the mountains. Now that he had finally made it out, with a house, a son, and money, he definitely didn't want to ruin it. So he agreed to Sophie without hesitation. But 500,000 was no small sum for him, especially after paying the down payment on the house. And Sophie had given him only 3 days to come up with it. If he wasn't happy, then I was. I lay on the bed playing on my phone. He leaned against me. "Honey, you haven't been to the law firm for a while, have you?" "I'm pregnant and don't want to go, plus there are senior brothers at the firm, so I feel at ease. He's still an outsider no matter what, impossible to guard against. How about I, as your husband, keep an eye on him for you?" I knew what he was up to. It was nothing more than the company seal being with Vincent, making it hard for him to make a move. I looked at his scheming face and couldn't help but smile. The trap he set, he was sure to fall right into it. Sure enough, 2 days later, I received news that Eric was showing up to work on time. This was all thanks to the employees who often complained on Facebook. From the moment Sophie approached Eric, I found him and made sure he saw the notice about Eric coming to work. Once I got the message, I went to the law firm. Just then, Margaret was going to see Luna. These past few days, at my instigation, Margaret had been visiting Luna several times a day. I spent the whole morning in the surveillance room with the old man who watched over it. I was convinced today was the day Eric would make his move. Sure enough, in the afternoon, seeing Vincent was not around, Eric sneaked into Vincent's office carrying a document. I found the official seal and stamped it on the document. I recorded everything with my phone, hid it in the old man's duty room, and told him not to mention that I had been there. 20 minutes later, Eric came to the surveillance room. He found an excuse to send the old man away. Then he operated the computer and deleted the footage of him entering Vincent's office. Of course, I also recorded the part where he deleted the video with my phone. Now all that's left is to wait. Wait for the money to be transferred into Eric's account. After receiving the private detective's notification that the money had arrived, I cooked and invited Luna over for a meal. I wanted to see with my own eyes how Luna and Eric, mother and son, would lose control. Actually, the three of us used to often eat together and go shopping. Back then, I was too naive to realize they had an affair. Several dishes were laid out on the dining table, all of them my favorites. Eric glanced at them and said, "Weren't we supposed to be treating Luna to dinner today? Why are all these dishes your favorites?" Look at me, how foolish I used to be. Every time we went out to eat, Eric always focused on Luna first, ordering her favorite dishes first, then his own, and mine only last. When we came to my house for dinner, it was mostly dishes Luna liked. Luna sat next to Eric and said, "It's okay, isn't Zoe pregnant?" Margaret shot Luna a sharp look. "Of course, I'm thinking about my grandson first." I sat down and ate while saying, "I want to say something. The baby, I've already had an abortion." "What?" Margaret and Luna exclaimed in unison. Luna looked at me with a bitter smile. "Sister Zoe, are you joking?" "I'm not joking. I had the child aborted." Seeing that I wasn't joking, Eric stood up and pointed at me. "Are you fucking crazy?" Margaret sat on the floor, crying and cursing me a cheap woman for aborting her grandson. I remained seated at the dining table, eating bite by bite. Luna stared at me like an enemy. "Zoe, Eric hasn't treated you badly. How could you abort his child?" I deliberately asked, "Luna, this is Eric and my child, and it's my family matter. Why are you looking at me like that?" Luna snapped, "I'm just feeling sorry for Eric." Of course she was angry. Although she couldn't have children, she had always longed for Eric to have a child, so she could smoothly marry him. She had waited 5 years for this child, and now it was all for nothing. I laughed and said, "I don't want my child to call you Mom in the future." Luna and Eric looked at me in disbelief. Margaret, hearing this, stopped her insults and turned to Luna, asking, "Was it you? Did you tell her? You can't have children yourself and yet you don't want our family to have an heir?" Eric asked, "You knew all along?" "If I hadn't found out early, I probably wouldn't even get to see my own child in the future." Luna said, "You're already married to Eric, so what if I have a child for him?" "Eric doesn't love you at all, he loves me. In the future, I'll treat his child like my own. What else are you unhappy about?" Hearing Luna's words, I laughed angrily. Am I supposed to be grateful? Margaret caught on too. "What's wrong with Luna helping you take care of the kids? If she couldn't have children, would it even be your turn?" I looked at their shameless faces and shook my head. "You'd better go tell the police yourselves." Margaret went crazy. "You aborted my grandchild and still dare to call the police? Then let the police come and judge this." After saying that, she plopped down in the living room and refused to get up. Eric sensed something was wrong. "Zoe, what do you mean?" Just as he finished speaking, there was a knock at the door. I went to open it, and outside stood several police officers in uniform. "Is Eric and Luna here?" Eric still didn't know that his illegal transfer of law firm funds had been discovered. "I'm Eric, what's going on?" "We suspect you and Ms. Luna of illegally transferring funds from the law firm. Please come with us for an investigation." Eric turned to me. "Zoe, what's going on?" I spread my hands. "It's obvious you illegally transferred the firm's money, got caught by senior brother, and he called the police." Luna's face went pale, her eyes reddened, and she lunged at me like a madwoman. "Crazy woman, you're insane. You took down my son and framed me for stealing money." Seeing the scene, the police stepped in and restrained her, taking both of them back to the station. I called the community security and had Margaret kicked out. The next day, relevant authorities came to the law firm and took away a large number of documents. They asked the accountant to cooperate with the investigation. She was trembling with fear, thinking there was something wrong with her accounts. I comforted her, telling her to relax, and reminded her that every transaction she handled followed the proper procedures and could withstand scrutiny. Soon, they found problems with every transaction that went through Eric's hands, and they compared my signature with the one Eric had forged. Then I sent the video footage I had captured to the police. The police discovered that Eric had transferred as much as $2 million over the past few years, with each sum first moved to several overseas accounts before being transferred to his own account. They also uncovered the house he bought for Luna. Luna was involved as well, motivated by the property. Both of them were definitely going to jail. After that, I filed for divorce and presented the evidence of Eric and Luna's affair to the judge. The judge made a decisive ruling and granted me the divorce. Afterwards, I reported Luna, Eric, Margaret, and Sophie for illegal surrogacy. The police quickly intervened and arrested Sophie and Margaret. I handed over the recordings I had to the police, but the others stubbornly denied everything. Unexpectedly, during the interrogation, Sophie had a drug relapse. A urine test revealed she was using drugs. Unable to withstand the torment of withdrawal, Sophie confessed. It turned out that after successfully conceiving, when the pregnancy was well advanced, Sophie secretly had 2 paternity tests done for the child. One test showed a 99% similarity between the child and Eric. The other test indicated the child's relation to Luna. She had intended to use these 2 paternity tests to firmly bind Eric and Luna together. But now, they became evidence against them. Then it was discovered that Sophie had been hospitalized for a miscarriage. This completely confirmed the illegal surrogacy activities of the 4. Eric and Luna will be in jail for at least 10 years. Margaret also earned a few years. As for Sophie, she later helped the police crack 2 drug trafficking and manufacturing cases. I didn't really pay attention to how many years they were ultimately sentenced to. After all, I was very busy helping the law firm's clients with their lawsuits.